The following program is rated 14+ and contains mature subject matter, coarse language, sexuality, and is intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Being inside the Brethren, you're made to feel part of a very, very exclusive elite.
We believed that we were closest to God, we had the freshest light, and that we'd have a special place in heaven close to Him.
We used to think that people were desperate to get into the Brethren. That's what we were told.
They live right among us. They could be your neighbor.
But we would have nothing to do with anyone else.
God comes first, so all the rules and regulations in the church, they come before anything else.
There was a lot of rules.
No pre-recorded music, no worldly literature.
No TV, no radio.
It was forbidden to go to university.
You can only work for a Brethren company.
You can't move house without permission. It's a very, very restricted life.
And severe consequences if you don't follow the rules.
I know the Brethren do surveillance because I've been asked to do it myself. If you leave the Brethren, you're totally cut off from your family, your friends, your everything.
It's made very, very clear to you that if you leave, you'll go to hell.
And subsequently, you fail at just about everything you try to do, is what we were told. And that's what they want. They want you ruined, so you crawl back to them.
You can't communicate with them. You may even never see them again. It's as if the other people are dead to you.
I couldn't bear the untruths anymore. I couldn't bear the treatment. That was the moment I knew I would never go back.
What is the Exclusive Brethren?
I think the Exclusive Brethren is a cult.
I had a great childhood. It was just full of life and love. My family was very loving. A lot of reading, museums, just good, clean fun, I guess you'd call it.
We had a big yard, big garden, huge trees in it. I spent a lot of time up trees or making things, building a telescope, model boats.
We used to laugh a lot in our family. We had a lot of music, a lot of noise. We tried to do outings with the children a lot. They were just good years.
We spent a lot of time outside. We did a lot of things like going fishing, going to creeks, finding salamanders.
I sure wouldn't have gone fishing. I'm shocked. I don't even know this person I was married to. Gone fishing? You went fishing? Crazy stuff. We wouldn't have done that, but we did have a lot of fun.
I really thought that we were just extra good people. I wanted to believe that we were special, that we were different. Who doesn't want to believe that of their church or their faith?
Caroline, Richard, Dennis, Christy, and Mike were all once members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, also known as the Exclusive Brethren. They each left at a different time and for different reasons, but their story of what life is like in the group is the same, and they are all sharing it for the first time. The Brethren deny they are a cult.
The Plymouth Brethren are a very tiny fundamentalist sect.
Well, it started in Ireland about 1830. Generally, the people in the group are very passionate. It's led to splits down over the years. Today, the Exclusive Brethren are numbering about 50,000 worldwide.
One thing that separates the Brethren from any other sect is that the Brethren isn't a church that you can join. That they don't want people to join.
They grow their ranks by having lots of children. We are told that you're born into this place, and it's the most special, prestigious place that you could ever be.
To be in the Brethren, we were taught to be in the world but not of it. So we would live our normal lives, we'd be in cities, but we were to be separate from the world in every single way.
The Brethren terminology for this is the doctrine of separation, which means that, physically you've got next door neighbors, you go out to do business in the world, but you always keep a barrier between yourself and the world. It's not a physical barrier, it's a mental barrier, it's a religious barrier that separates you from the world at large.
We used to think that people were desperate to get into the Brethren. That's what we were told. That so many people would just wish they could be here.
We were the chosen ones, and you felt sorry for other people that didn't have the light that we had. So it led to a lot of pride of how wonderful we were and how special we were. Right up till today, I have no idea why the axe fell on me.
We were told that Dennis Ragg was a very evil, wicked person.
I don't remember too much about Dennis, but I do remember that his wife was considered a sister standing for the truth, or a widow for the truth.
We had a very happy family. My wife and I were actually related. We're second cousins. We grew up in Toronto, and we quickly fell in love and got married shortly thereafter, and we had 5 children, and we had a very noisy, happy house. Lots of music. We had a piano, an organ, drums, guitar, and we would entertain a lot. We had a lot of fun, and it was a very good marriage. At some point, I can't tell you when or how, but I guess I stopped being quite so happy-clappy. I don't mean clappy in the sense of clapping hands, but just being Mr. Happy, and you know, I started seeing cracks in the system. There have been some things happen in Toronto that were very biased, very unfair, where 2 people did the same thing, but a favored person got away with it scot-free. The unfavored person got in bad and felt this wasn't right. So I didn't laugh as heartily at the jokes as I had previously, and so on. So I guess the powers that be realized that there's something wrong with Dennis. But to this day, I don't know what the charge was, except that I'm assuming the head man said, kick him out.
The way that control is exercised in the Brethren, the way authority comes down, is that there's the so-called man of God or the elect vessel.
He's the Lord's representative on earth. He's the only man on earth that has a direct conduit to God.
His words are considered almost on a par with Scripture.
Oh, he's more important than Jesus.
And if you cross paths with a man of God, it's not going to end well for you.
In my case, the man of God had phoned up the leader in Toronto and said, Dennis should be shut up.
To be shut up, you are essentially quarantined. You are kept to your home. I mean, you can go to work and buy your groceries and leave your house in that way, but you can't have any contact with Brethren members, and you can't have any access to church meetings, because essentially you might contaminate the others with your sin.
It's like solitary confinement. I was shell-shocked. I have to admit, a lot of it is almost like having a bad road accident. Once I was shut up, my 3 oldest children started packing their suitcases, and there were cars outside from the Brethren waiting for them to come out of the house, and they took them away. And because I had been shut up, my wife was also shut up. We were still madly in love with each other, but there could be no physical contact. My wife and the 2 little boys, Eric and Neil, would be eating in the kitchen with the door closed, and nobody would talk to me. As time went on, there was less and less communication back and forth. And periodically, these 2 priests would come and visit you and interrogate. I was a good young brother. I adhered to all the rules, but they would come and they'd want to know, are you repentant? Well, repentant of what? Well, you should know. It was all nebulous. It was all insinuations. Nobody would come out and say what it was. It's hard to explain the terror of it. What happens is, very often, the punishment is so severe that people will capitulate. It's just an unspoken way of behaving that you would comply. I didn't do that. After I'd been shut up for 5 months. I was then told that now you've been withdrawn from.
It means they're done with you. You are out of the church. Once you're in that state, it's only a matter of time before your wife divorces you if you're married, or your husband divorces you.
People in that position were basically dead to us. If we saw them in the streets, we wouldn't talk to them. Your faith is the most important thing to you, and if that means that you have to let go of your sisters and brothers, mothers, fathers, children, you'll do it because that's the right thing to do.
You can't communicate with them. You may even never see them again, literally never see them again in your life.
I certainly made every effort to persuade my wife to consider the possibility that the brethren were wrong. But she could not allow that. She could not allow that crack in the facade to be explored. Because you've always been taught that if you're kicked out of the brethren, your life is over.
You were considered lost. Satan had taken you over and was guiding you in your life.
And subsequently, you fail at just about everything you try to do when you leave. You financially fail. Everything fails. You end up in the gutter.
Just morally corrupt, just ruined.
The teaching that's ingrained into you that if you leave, you will go to hell, you'll spend eternity in hell. Because you're never exposed to anyone who believes anything different, that idea is never challenged. You just believe it, you just live it. I mean, it's irrational, it's illogical, but to me it was all very, very real. I think most people in the Brethren live in that sense of fear and apprehension. It's just the atmosphere you live in.
We had this internal sort of sense of just constant fear that if we slip up, we will go to hell or we'll be punished. So we always had this shadow over us. And then there were always people kind of watching too, you know? People would always be looking for things. And there was a lot of rules. The list is endless. I could go on for a long time.
No restaurants, no hotels, no pre-recorded music, no worldly literature, no novels, no magazines.
No TV, no radio, no movies. The radio was actually called by one of the leaders a pipeline of filth. And I would assume that goes for television as well.
No sex education.
No sex education, no pets.
No pets.
No makeup, piercings, jewelry.
You can only work for a Brethren company.
I understand nowadays they have their own schools, so children don't mix with other children.
You can't move house without permission.
Starting sometime in the 1960s, it was forbidden to go to university.
You can't go for holiday. You can't travel without permission. It's a very, very restricted life. Your freedoms are minimal.
And we are supposed to submit willingly to being controlled. We are to welcome that control.
And there's so much control, so much regulation.
And severe consequences if you don't follow the rules.
We were at church every single day and all day on Sunday.
And woe betide someone that did miss a meeting. You just didn't. You would be expected to be at a meeting every day, 7 days a week. Where they meet is called a meeting room. The buildings look like windowless warehouses.
Everybody would go into the room. The men sit in a circle at the front, and the women and children sit in a circle at the back.
And as women, we were not allowed to speak. And that was one of my big questions, you know, why can't we speak? I was directed back to the Bible verse saying, "Let your woman be silent in the assemblies." Being called out in the meeting was very, very traumatizing.
One that sticks with me is there was a couple who'd been married 50, 55 years, and they had to confess that they had fooled around prior to them getting married. And it was rather grotesque, really, delving into that kind of stuff in front of their grandchildren.
Yeah, people put up with all kinds of horrible humiliation, public confessions.
And quite often, people would just confess of their own accord, even without being found out.
Well, I remember, see, this is a big thing. So I buckled in my late teens, maybe even early 20s by then. I buckled under the pressure of feeling guilty for things that I had done. So I asked to speak to the priests. I went through a list of things that I'd done, which included listening to pre-recorded music and watching TV. Masturbation was the biggest thing, and that just caused me so much shame. These people don't realize that I masturbate once in a while, and nobody else would have ever done anything like that. I knew I was going to hell. I knew it. At the meeting, the leader picked up the microphone and read off a long list of everything that I'd done in front of about 250 people. Masturbation wasn't announced. There's
always
not
euphemisms.
Yeah.
But still, everybody reads between the lines and knows
Right.
what that is.
My mom wept in shame. She was so ashamed of me. She was just ashamed that she had failed as a mom. They had failed as parents. And they had this wicked child. No other parents had a wicked child like that.
It was just so hard to do anything without feeling tremendous guilt or shame. I've lived with the sense of guilt and shame my entire life, and to this day I'm trying to undo the traces of it.
When you do something bad, you almost expect God to punish you. And bad things did happen to people in the group. If you're out of favor at the time, then that was God speaking to you.
That's how you feel yourself, because it's ingrained in you to think that way. And it's very, very intensive indoctrination. But if you don't do it for yourself, others will do it for you. I was born in Cambridge in the UK, which is, of course, a university town. My grandfather went to university there. But of course, by the time I came along, university was banned. My family, we were unhappy in Cambridge. The rules were enforced very strictly, and there was a bad atmosphere in church. There was divisions in the place. So when this opportunity came to move, to relocate, to strengthen these smaller congregations, we seized on it. We were very keen to move to Canada. And so we ended up moving to Regina with 5 children, which was, of course, a huge move. Things were much more relaxed compared to Cambridge. It was very isolated, so they could kind of get away with stuff without it being reported back. There were just a lot less pressure. And then, of course, all that changed. I was driving on a country road, perfect sunny morning, perfect visibility. And my last memory was seeing the highway ahead of me. And the next thing I knew, I was becoming conscious and the vehicle was sitting in a field. And there was another vehicle a few hundred yards away that obviously I'd collided with. And the paramedics came along and just pulled me away, and I found out that the other person had died. That was the moment everything changed. My life as I knew it ended at that point. I was barely out of hospital before, the questions were being asked. What have you done? Why is God speaking to you in this way? I, of course, I was terribly distressed, terribly upset, terribly guilty. But this was just what they had concluded. This was so bad. What had happened to me was so bad. It must be a sin of that magnitude for God to do that to me. It was an incredibly cruel way to treat someone, it's a kind of psychological torture. You might have thought that my family would have objected to this harsh treatment, but they know this is the rules, they know this is what happened. So they just went along with it, and my mental state just deteriorated, it just spiraled down. It raised questions as to whether we should ever have moved to Canada at all. And we were kept in suspense. We didn't hear the answer for about 4 months. And finally the answer comes, you know, Richard is a failure. He should never have moved. He's got to go back to where he came from. He's got to go back to Cambridge. And that was devastating, not just for me personally, but for the whole family. But you had no choice. You had to go. I didn't know what was going to transpire as a result of that. But I knew that life would never, ever be the same again. If it hadn't been for that accident, I would be in the Brethren still. The worst thing about separation, where it causes the most grief, is where it splits a family in half. You know, typically that will happen where one parent will leave the Brethren, the other one remains, and then the children have this terrible choice. They have to choose between one parent or the other parent.
In my case, I have 3 older children. I have tried many, many times to talk. I sent them letters, but it's never happened. And I was ostracized totally. It was fully expected that my ex-wife would be taking the 2 boys. It was a huge surprise when Eric said, I'm going to stay with Dad. And Neil went back to the group with his mother. My ex-wife would refuse to talk to me. She couldn't, because I was evil. It had to be Eric would call her. So on a Friday, Eric called his mother and said, Mom, can I come tomorrow to see Neil? And she said, no. And he said, why not? And she said, well, because you're living with Dad and he's wicked and you're going the same way. He said, well, when can I see? And she said, never. I didn't expect it to happen so soon, but I knew I would end up probably having to go to court. So I recorded these conversations. With Neil, they would have pumped him full of terrible, terrible stuff about me. And the kid's psyche was really screwed up.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, Neil.
Yeah?
I'll come around tomorrow morning and pick you up.
No.
Yes, I will.
No, I won't.
No, I'm coming to pick you up tomorrow morning, Neil.
No, you aren't.
What do you mean, no, I'm not? I am...
I am not coming.
Well, I'm coming to pick you up, son. I'll be there at 9 o'clock.
You will not. I've told you before I will not come. Goodbye.
Well...
That is final. I'm not being picked up at 9 o'clock.
Yes, Neil.
Goodbye.
I'm picking
Is
up...
that registered? Goodbye.
I would assume he is about 9 years old at the time of that tape. A few years after that phone call, Neil unexpectedly and without any encouragement from me, he just showed up at my back door. When Neil ran away, he was a very, very disturbed young boy. If you get inside Neil's brain, I think he probably came expecting a monster and he didn't find a monster. It just morphed into that he just stayed. He never ever did go back once he came. And when he was 17, he got bone cancer, and it was very, very much touch and go. He was under chemo and radiation, the whole works. And it looked like he was dying. So I went around to his mother's house. She wouldn't open the door to me, but she spoke through an upstairs window. And I pleaded with her to go and see Neil. And she refused. Her response was, no, I can't do that. I can't have any contact with Neil. So she never ever did contact him. She was that indoctrinated, I guess. He had his leg amputated. He's one-legged now, but I'm very, very proud of him. We are very, very close. From that tape we just played, it wouldn't sound like it, but we are.
Nearly everybody I know, every family that I know in the Brethren has somebody that are shunned. I mean, there's children being born. My friends are having kids. I don't see them. I don't necessarily know their names. You know, things are moving on within the church, but I don't have any access to that information, so it's a whole world that's closed to me now. It's like an abyss between us. It's just this gap that you can never cross. The breaking point for me was the way my dad was treated. In 2013, my family moved to Abbotsford, but I'm originally from Toronto. My family was different in a way that we tended to think for ourselves, and that was quite frowned upon growing up. My dad knew his Bible really well, and I think that that caused some friction because he would see the discrepancies, how the brethren were behaving and what the Bible was telling them to do, and he would point it out, and that got him in a lot of flack for a long time until he stopped speaking altogether. It's just been a whole series of disappointments, basically, for him. I think that's the part that was hard for me, is because he's always been able to weather these things, but this time he just cracked. He actually went on a business trip, and when he came back, his back was so sore that he chose not to go to one of the leaders' meetings in Seattle, and for that, he was deemed to be against the leader. It was after that they shut my dad up. I saw him prostrate on the floor crying, and I'd never seen my dad broken like that. That's when everything broke for me, because how could anything good, anything right, anything supportive, how could any community treat someone like that and bring them to the floor? I couldn't bear the untruths anymore. I couldn't bear the treatment from people that were supposed to be our family. That was the moment I knew I would never go back.
There's always lots of reasons. There's never one reason. But ultimately, I left because I lost faith. I think it was the dishonesty that made me lose faith. There was dishonesty in dealing with the media. There was dishonesty between brethren, and it wasn't called out. In my increasing disbelief, my increasing doubts were very stressful for my children, for my wife, but they too are indoctrinated, and they certainly didn't share those doubts. They didn't see that the system as a whole was wrong. They didn't see it like that, and there was no way they were going to leave. So really it was down to me. I had to make the choice. Do I stay and comply, or do I leave? And I just knew I couldn't stick it. I couldn't just live a lie. I knew I had to get out of there. I left in the June of 2015. I just loaded up my stuff in my car, and I haven't spoken to my children or my wife since that day. I think about my children every day, my parents, but there's nothing I can do to contact them would put them in an impossible situation. It's made very, very clear to you that if you leave, you'll go to hell. So people are trapped in the thing. They're trapped. They can't just walk away. It's almost impossible to leave unless you're prepared to make that sacrifice.
Very few families have ever left the brethren intact. The way the brethren are set up, you have to lose so much that it's basically not worth it. And if we left at a time when our kids are older and much more established in there, then that would force us to have to choose between our kids. And we're never leaving our kids. We're never letting our kids go. We've known each other all our lives.
Mm-hmm. I was from Hamilton.
Yeah, and I was from Toronto, and the churches would get together about 4 times a week.
We'd be always at people's houses for meals and stuff, so it wasn't just at church that we saw each other. Yeah, we just grew up together. We just knew each other.
It was me.
Yeah.
First thought about it. And you were not very happy.
Mm-hmm.
It was just something that was very, very gradual. Just a little thought to maybe start pop into your head. I stopped going to meeting because I felt like a hypocrite. It just became too much for me. Having to go and sit through something that you don't agree with and you don't believe, And to just sit there and not say anything is not in my nature.
So with him not attending meetings is really, really overwhelming and super stressful because I still thought that the Brethren were the right place. I was like praying about it all the time. I wrote letters to like the leader over in Australia. I would ask for like local priests to come and talk to Mike and try and like change his mind. I never got any answers to my letters, and the priest never came and talked to him at all. So it became very obvious that this was not a system of care because nobody actually even cared. Like, I was struggling. And so as much as I hate that that happened, it did help to open my eyes to see through the lies that it's not what I was told it was.
So we were at a point where we realized we have to make the break now, because if we wait any longer, our kids are going to be established enough that some will want to stay. At that point, there is no possible way of keeping our family together.
Yeah.
It was especially about the girls, because the girls don't have any choice but to become a housewife. And we didn't really see our girls doing very well at that.
The kids knew we weren't going to any more meetings. They knew stuff was happening, but they really did not know. There was a 1-week school break at the end of October, and we didn't tell them until that day.
We wanted them to be able to say goodbye to their friends because we knew they would never see them again.
I don't remember the morning of the last day of school that well, but the afternoon pickup was terrible. All the kids, they were all crying. Like, every kid that got off the bus. And all the mothers were crying, and it was so awful. And they like coming up to me and like saying like, if you have to leave, just don't take the kids. You can't take the kids away from the Brethren, you know, leave the kids. As if I'd leave my kids. Like, it was just incomprehensible to them that we would leave and take our children away from the Brethren. Didn't even see that taking the kids was the main reason we were leaving. We were leaving for the kids so they'd have a chance, so they'd have an opportunity to have a better life. Everybody lost. Everybody lost something. And the thing that's really, really hard is that the Brethren don't see that they make that choice, because our family, our home, our hearts are still wide open to them, and they have chosen to close that door.
And to go through the extreme emotions that come with being rejected from everybody you ever knew at the same time as trying to start over sets you up for ruin. And that's what they want. They want you ruined, so you crawl back to them. I know that's what my family want. They want me to crawl back and beg for my place. And if you ever had any doubt it was a cult, I think those doubts would vanish after you leave and you see how they treat you.
A couple of years after I actually left the Brethren, I had to go back to Canada to deal with some of the legal matters relating to the road accident I had. And by that point, I felt I was ready for a new relationship. And I started talking to a Jamaican girl online. You couldn't have a bigger contrast between the exclusive Brethren ways and Kenesha. She's just full of life. She's vivacious. She's got a great sense of humor. I mean, she even thinks I'm funny, which most people don't. I was just blown away by it. It was more than I could ever have dreamed of. So we got married in Jamaica, and then we had to build a life together. After we settled down in Toronto, I started to think a lot about the persons who were still trapped in there, how much better their lives could be. You know, the injustice of the way they were being treated. And so I started to put some things online just to try and open people's eyes just hoping that I might help someone else, just one other person, to get free and to experience what life really was. Kenesha at that time was working in a Jamaican restaurant. She came home from the restaurant one evening saying she'd been followed home.
How sure are you that it is the brethren looking for you?
Well, who else could it possibly be? There's no one else who would have any interest in me. I'm just a completely obscure person. The only people who have an interest in terrorizing me, frightening me, trying to get their hands on me, is the brethren.
I know the brethren do surveillance because I've been asked to do it myself, and I have done it.
I mean, I personally wasn't worried myself, but it was a different story for Kenesha. They were getting on the bus with her, they were following her to work. It was very distressing for her. We realized the only solution was to move, and that's where Dennis Ragg came into the picture.
I saw the car parked on the street. It was definitely there spying, watching, surveilling them. We quickly loaded up the SUV with everything and we took off. These guys tried to follow, and so had Kenesha take the battery out of her telephone so they, in case they were trying to track that way, and we ended up getting away from them. I call it my James Bond moment.
Now we basically live in hiding. No one knows where we live. Our address isn't online. We use someone as a cutout, so our mail all goes to a third party, and then it gets forwarded to us, and that's how we live. But even though I'm living in hiding, it's still a vastly better life than I could ever have had in the Brethren. And other people who've left, they all say the same thing. Nothing would ever drag them back into that system.
The exclusive brethren today is very, very different from the exclusive brethren that I grew up in.
I imagine the rules would be quite different even since I left. And that seems to be the pattern over the years, is that they come up with new light and everything changes for everybody.
A whole lot of rules that would have been absolute divine principles just disappeared overnight. What the Brethren pursue is what's called the prosperity gospel, that God will bless you materially if you're a good person. All the changes that have come into the Brethren, in my opinion, have been towards materialism, towards money.
The Brethren define success as financial success.
Financial prosperity is equated with spirituality.
The people that didn't have money or weren't business-minded have really fallen through the cracks in this latest change of tide. It just seems like everything has become very materialistic, to the clothes you wear, to the food you put out on the table.
I'm thinking of some people right now, and they're beautiful people, but they were mocked because they just couldn't afford to keep up with the Joneses.
The keeping up with the appearances, keeping up with the Joneses, that's been the norm. But what they've done seems to be bringing them a lot closer to worldliness than I ever witnessed growing up.
They're so close to the world in many cases now, and yet they still practice this extreme separation.
They've become more worldly than the world is itself. The Brethren have a very standard response when they get adverse media, which is firstly to deny everything, claim it didn't happen, claim it's not true. Secondly, they talk about the source of information. It's from, disaffected former members with an axe to grind.
I wish they would just soberly and honestly examine their own hearts and see that it's false. What they're believing is false. Because it's serious. It's lives that are being destroyed here. Some people die pining to be accepted back, but it never happens. And I even know of some who commit suicide. Some people belong in there. They need the social protection that the group provides. Some people can't survive out in the real world.
That's the ironic thing, I guess, is that it's their very practices that cause a lot of that to happen. Their practice of shunning. And the Brethren will cherry pick the leavers and tell stories about the ones that failed, but you never hear about the ones that succeed. And there's a lot that end up succeeding. Not saying it's easy. It's the hardest thing we've ever done in our lives. But success is possible.
Yeah.
I just pray daily that my kids could get a glimpse of how full my life is now. And I haven't ended up in the gutter. I haven't rejected Christianity. I'm financially stable. My wife, Mary, and I have been married for 29 years. I have a wonderful circle of friends. So I feel very blessed and very happy. Yeah, life is wonderful. I wish they could just see it.
I think the biggest change in my life, having left the Brethren, is just a sense of freedom, just a sense of liberty. There's just not a cloud in the sky like there is when you're in the Brethren.
Telling this story is so important because it's a way of taking our power back. There was an innocence that I've lost. Like, I miss that innocence in a way when everything was okay and I didn't see it for what it was. I don't even know how to say how important freedom is.
And having freedom is worth so much more than being there and being wealthy. We have a different kind of wealth.
Yeah.
A better kind.
Yeah.